wash in the pool of Salim, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way therefore and washed and came again seeing. I began the message this morning by stating life wasn't easy for this blind man. His only source of income came from begging. And because of his situation, because it was so hard, so difficult, it would have been easy for him to become bitter towards God, mad at God for the way his life turned out. I also mentioned that in ancient times, those with any blemish, those with any disability, they weren't even allowed into the temple. And that had to be a difficult thing for a blind man or for anyone with a disability to accept. Not only was their life harsh, but they couldn't even go into the house of God to worship. They would place themselves outside the entrance ways. They could hear the music, they could hear the singing, but that's about as close as they got to it. And they would beg and receive offerings from anybody coming or going. That's the best it got for them. Think about that. Imagine if someone was outside these doors with some kind of problem and we said, come no further, that's as far as you can go. God help. I don't really know the reason why. It doesn't really matter why, that's just how it was. But I'll tell you this much. It ain't like that today. Anyone is welcome. I hope sometimes when these windows are open in the summertime that someone will hear the message of the gospel, hear the singing, and just come in out of curiosity. Add to that the fact that Jesus was passing by and no one had informed this blind man about it. No indication this guy knew that Jesus was within his grasp, within his distance. No one nudged him and said, hey, listen, here's your best ticket right here. Jesus can heal you. He couldn't see Jesus, had no idea that help was on the way. And then lastly was the fact that the disciples were talking about a situation right in front of him. They were asking Jesus if he was blind because of his sin or his parents' sin. The guy was blind, not deaf, and heard everything they said about him, and that had to be troubling. This morning we first looked at the danger of blaming God for making me this way. There is a danger in doing that because, number one, God doesn't make mistakes. And the moment we start thinking that God makes mistakes, He stops being God. We stop believing in God. Secondly, it can make you bitter towards God. And once bitterness sets in, it's only a matter of time before it poisons your soul. I don't believe this fellow was at that point, but we won't know for sure till we meet him in heaven. But it's very possible that Jesus came to this man in his darkest hour, maybe when he was just getting to that point of thinking, there's no hope. What's the use? A third reason why it's a danger to blame God for making us this way is that God's strength is made perfect in weakness. This guy didn't have a whole lot going for him, but what he did have going for him is that Jesus was coming his way. Jesus was passing by. God's strength is made perfect in weakness. There might have been somebody coming down that same road that was the picture of health, that was strong, physically in good shape. And people like that are sometimes hard to reach because they think that religion is a crutch. Why do I need God? I'm doing fine on my own. That kind of attitude. And it's tough to reach them because they got money in their pocket, they got their health, they got a good job. I don't need God, I don't need religion, I'm doing fine. But that same message given to a man that's broken, that's beaten up by life, the Bible says that the poor, the needy heard him gladly, heard the gospel gladly. Why? Because they had no hope. As long as people think they can get by on their own, they're not going to turn to God. As long as people think that they don't need any help, they won't turn to God. So God has to sometimes break us. And when you're flat on your back, you got no place to look but up. You're listening to God real good. And then secondly, we looked at the fact that the danger of justifying being born this way. So many are making excuses for the life that they live, justifying their sinful behavior by saying, I can't help it, I can't stop doing what I do because I was born this way. My father was a drunk and I'm a drunk. My family was violent and I'm violent. The danger of that kind of thinking is that there's no accountability. You can justify any behavior by simply saying, I was born this way. And this morning I mentioned that in one sense, they are right We are born this way because we're born sinners. We are born in sin, but it still doesn't make it right to continue in sin.
Yes.
If we don't give our lives to God, our sin nature will soon be out of control. And there's no telling how wicked and depraved we might become without Jesus. I sometimes read these articles about Bruce Jenner. And there's a girl named Jazz, a guy that looks exactly like a girl. And I read about some of these people that are into some weird things, and I just wonder, what happened in their life to make them go down a path of darkness like that? Is it demonic influences? Is it something screwed up from their childhood? I mean, I've had bad days in my life, but never to the point where my mind was in such a dark place like that. But something had to happen to set them down that road of wanting to be like a girl or homosexuality, or whatever it may have been.
I think about these things. I read of weird things, you know, these gender rights or whatever they call them, stuff like that. And I say to myself, I wasn't that bad after all. I'm almost normal compared to how these people get these thoughts entered into their heads. I mean,
but it's getting worse and worse. It's getting worse and worse. Like I mentioned this morning, adults that want to dress up like babies. I read about people that fall in love with objects like bridges or a statue and believe that bridge is their mate. I mean, it's just weird stuff. I can't understand it, but there's no telling what our flesh is capable of if we don't go to God's way. It can go to some dark places. I close by stating, even Christians struggle with problems with sin, with disabilities. But in our hour of need, Jesus is always passing by. Whatever it is you're dealing with, whatever trouble you're facing, whatever sin is knocking you down, Jesus is always passing by, and He's there with open arms, wanting us to come unto Him, to cast our burdens upon Him. But we can't continue to hold on to our sin and Jesus also. No man can serve two masters. So when Jesus is there saying, come unto me, He's also letting us know, but you got to put this sin to rest. You got to let go of this sin. He wants us to completely give our lives to Him. And that's the only way to make a clean break from our past. Make a clean break from our sinful habits. That's where we left off. And I want to mention a third thing tonight. Number 3, the danger of missed opportunities. As I mentioned this morning, this blind man was dealing with some hard times. And he was in need of help. He could have used a friend in this dark hour of his. But it seems like he was facing these hardships of life all alone. I mentioned this morning that his parents literally threw him under the bus when the Pharisee said, is this your son? They said, hey, we don't know nothing about it. Ask him. He's of age. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. There's no friends. The disciples should have been reaching out to this guy. They should have brought him to Jesus, knowing that Jesus had already healed countless others that were blind, that were lepers, that were crippled, that had some disability. I mean, that's what Jesus did. But you never see it cross their minds and say, hey, grab this guy. Let's take him to Jesus. He's right here. We'll take but a minute. This morning I compared the situation we're reading about to the one where the 4 friends took their buddy who was crippled on his bed, brought him to Jesus. Couldn't get near the door because of the crowd, but they were determined to bring him to Jesus, so they lowered him through the roof that he might be healed, and he was healed. That's determination. They did everything they could to bring him to Jesus, and God worked in a mighty way. Now, in this situation here, if Jesus wouldn't have reached out to this guy, the indication seems to be the disciples would have just kept going on their merry way. Hey, we don't got time, maybe another time. The disciples had the same kind of opportunity with this blind man, but instead of reaching out to him, they held a theological discussion concerning the man's blindness. You think he's blind because of his sin or because of the sin of his parents? And the bottom line is, who cares? It doesn't matter why he was blind. All that matters is that he needed Jesus. Because souls are hanging in the balance. This man's soul was hanging in the balance. Well, they were walking down the road, arguing whether whose sin caused him to be blind. This man needed to be saved. This man needed help. Now, I understand that the disciples weren't filled with the Holy Spirit at this point, but that's no excuse. They had eyes to see that folks all around them were hurting and in need. They had eyes to see that this guy needed help, that he might have been at the brink of giving up hope. They had ears to hear the cries of those calling out for help. Those that were blind would cry out, "Alms, alms, alms!" They could hear the cries, "Help me, Jesus!" And they had hearts that should have had a love for others and a burden for souls. All the time I pray, God, fill me with compassion. Give me a burden for souls. Help me to love the unlovely. This wasn't the first time the disciples reacted in a wrong way concerning those in need. I'll just name a few of them, but you'll get the indication here. Opportunities where they missed chances to be a blessing, to serve God. The disciples rebuked the mothers for bringing their babies to Jesus. And Jesus flat out told them, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of God." He rebuked them sharply for trying to keep these mothers from bringing babies unto him. Could have been a real blessing. They could have all gotten in on it, but they had a problem with it. The disciples told Jesus to get rid of the crowd that had followed them out into the desert place because the hour is late, they got no food. Jesus worked another mighty miracle in feeding those people that were out there in the desert. But the disciples wanted him to hit the road. The disciples were shocked to find Jesus talking to that Samaritan woman at the well. First of all, she was a Samaritan, which is considered dogs or half-breeds, mutts, mutants, if you will. And the fact that she was a woman with a scarlet letter, that she was a woman of ill repute, they wouldn't have been caught dead talking to her or being anywhere near her. She got gloriously saved. Revival broke out in that Samaritan city because Jesus took an interest in her life. In Luke 18, the crowd tried to silence the blind man that cried out, "Son of David, heal me! Son of David, heal my blindness!" They said, look, you're making too much noise. Jesus is passing by. Be quiet. And there's no indication that the disciples tried to discourage that crowd from silencing that blind man, but Jesus stopped what he was doing and healed him. Those are just a few of the many missed opportunities that the disciples would have missed. And when you start to add up how many lives could have been affected by those missed opportunities, it's a lot. Yep.
I watched a movie called The Gospel of John, and that part about the woman, the harlot, all right? And it was such a good part of the movie because these people, when they stone somebody to death or whatever, they have piles of like small boulders there.
Yeah.
Right? And when he said, let him who has not sinned not throw the first stone, they all looked at each other and started walking away.
Yeah.
Wow.
Powerful, right? Yeah. Amen. Christians today struggle with the same thing. No telling how many times God has tried to bring someone across our path that he wants us to reach out to, but we were too busy, or we were too focused on our own problems, or perhaps it was just too much time and effort to reach out to them, or maybe we just didn't want to be bothered with extra responsibility. Whatever the case, missed opportunities to be used by God should concern us. Because there's people in need outside these doors. How do we avoid missed opportunities? Number one, by walking in the Spirit, because only then will we be sensitive to God's leading. When God says, hey, listen, call up so-and-so. Hey, go knock on so-and-so's door. Hey, go spend some time with so-and-so. He needs some love. We just loved on George today. I wasn't sure what he was going to say, so I talked to him briefly, and I realized it wasn't nothing big, but we just loved on him, and he needed love today.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that he got some help. Nancy got some help today. God told me she was going to be here. God told me George was going to be here. I knew they were going to be here. I didn't build the message around that fact. I just knew they were going to be here, and that they would get some help. So it's being sensitive to the Holy Spirit so we don't miss these opportunities, because sometimes we have tunnel vision. We're just so locked up in our own lives that we don't see that God's got somebody He wants us to reach out to.
Today's daily bread had something out of Luke 14:4 or 4:14 or something like that, and it said about being anointed. You did that anointing thing?
That's good.
And I'm like, wow. How does He have a message like this?
How about that?
On the same day it's the daily bread.
It's good. A second way we can avoid missed opportunities is by keeping your eyes open for the opportunities. Ask God to open your eyes so that you don't miss the opportunities. That's the whole point of passages like watch and pray. Be sober and vigilant. It's talking about keeping your eyes open for the enemy, of course, but also for opportunities of service that come our way that we may not see. Thirdly, stop focusing on our own problems. Stop being so focused on self. Sometimes I'll talk about people and I can't get a word in edgewise because it's all about, oh, what was me, oh, me, I'm. Best way to get your mind off of your problems is by throwing your life into somebody else, helping somebody else with their problems, and then many times you realize, man, my problems ain't half as bad as I thought they were when you start seeing what other people are going through. But it gets your mind off of self and focused on others. And while we're at it, man, there's times we need to put that stupid cell phone away because it takes up too much of our time. And when you're focused on that thing, you can't be focused on God's work. You're missing opportunities because we're just locked into that phone. Number 4, have a servant's attitude, a willingness to be a blessing to others, and opportunities will come your way. It might be just opening up the door for somebody. I talked to somebody, they were helping their neighbor, just going out there, knocking on their door, saying, can I shovel your driveway? Boy, you want to talk about being a blessing to someone by helping them shovel. I got stuck. Couldn't get my car off this snow mound. Rich came up like an angel and helped me. We got that thing out of there. It was a real blessing. He just was there. God sent him my way. It was a real blessing. And God will give you those opportunities of service. And there's no telling what doors might be opened by just being a blessing. Going that extra mile, if you will.
I actually thanked the Lord when I got out of my truck and said, let me go walk this guy out. I thanked the Lord. And I'm like,
amen.
Like,
good.
Like people say, oh, God sent somebody to help me, and boom, it's
Yep.
there. I happened to be up at the Fairgrounds Plaza before I got the new battery and alternator. And I was calling Nate on the phone to come tell me. This lady pulls right up in the car and says, sir, do you need to jump? She didn't say, do you have a flat tire or anything like that? She said, do you need to jump? And I said, Nate, hold on. I'll see you later. And Angel just showed up. And I hung up. It was like,
that's it.
not even 5 minutes.
You just drive away feeling good when you know you can help somebody with no strings attached. And then number 5, always keep in mind, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Because when we start thinking like Jesus, we'll soon be used like Jesus. Danger of missed opportunity. Every day ask God to bring people across your path. Then ask God to not let you miss it. Number 4, the danger of wrong assumptions. As stated earlier, the disciples wrongly assumed that this man was blind for a reason. They assumed he was blind because of some sin he had committed or because of some sin of his parents. And when they went to Jesus to ask him about it, he flat out told them they were wrong on both accounts. It wasn't because of his sin or his parents' sin. He was born blind for the glory of God because he was fixing to get saved. And if you study it out, during his 3.5-year ministry, Jesus didn't focus any of his attention on why folks were in bad shape or on what particular sinful habit was making a mess of their life. He didn't focus on that. He focused his attention on changing their lives, transforming their lives through the gospel, and then telling them, listen, go and sin no more. He didn't say, he didn't give a list, I don't do this, don't do this. He said, look, you're born again now, you're saved, your life has been transformed. Go and sin no more. You've been given a fresh start and a new beginning. Hallelujah. In many cases, in which he healed someone, he didn't even mention there was no mention of any sin. Because not every disability is a result of sin. Many are just born that way. Jesus didn't sit down and do a diagnostic. Okay, let's get to the root of the problem. What have you done? What causes? He didn't worry about that. And it's a dangerous thing to be presumptuous concerning what others are going through. Christian gets deathly sick. Another church member gets into a bad car accident. Someone else loses a child. Some folks start to assume, well, there must have been something to that. God must be bringing judgment upon them, and with no other explanation why that happened. Pastor got killed, man. He must have done something wrong. Maybe his work was done and God was just calling him home.
Yeah.
But that's what happens a lot of times. Boy, he's had a bad year. He must not be right with God. Be careful with that kind of attitude, because God might give you just a taste of what those people are going through to make you realize that's not why it happened, but now you'll know. You know, we start seeing those kind of things. God might have us walk a mile in someone else's shoes, so be careful when you start having that kind of presumptuous attitude, and folks do it. When Job went through his time of trying, suffering more than just about any man alive, losing all that he had, including his health, Job's 3 friends, with friends like that, who needs enemies? His 3 friends show up, and rather than comfort him, rather than encourage him, these 3 rascals, each one of them condemned Job by wrongly believing, you must have done something wrong. You must have got some unconfessed sin in your life, Job. That can be the only explanation as to why this happened. You must have done something that brought God's wrath upon you. Chapter after chapter are these guys just berating Job, saying, no, you're not right with God, Job. And Job knew in his heart that his heart was right with God. And it was like kicking a man when he's already down to have to listen to their false accusations against him. Later on, God appears and he lets them know that it's only because of Job's prayer that God didn't kill them all for their hardness of heart to Job in his hour of need. There is a danger in wrongly assuming why some tragedy happens. We're not God, and we can't possibly understand why certain things happen. And rather than waste time trying to make sense of things that don't make sense, instead of trying to figure out why something happened, our time would be much better spent just taking the situation to God in prayer, especially when it concerns others. Someone loses a baby. Doesn't matter why the baby was taken. Just pray for that family they can get through it. Someone's got some bad health. Don't even waste your breath saying, oh Lord, is there something I need to know about? Is there some... Just take it to God in prayer. That's why I'm almost opposed to prayer chains. Because prayer chains can turn into gossip chains. Oh really? Oh, who are we praying for? What happened? What's the scoop? What did they do? I just contact people that I know that can get a prayer through to God and say, hey, listen, you don't need to know the details, but pray for so-and-so. They're going through some stuff right now. You're going through some deep waters. Just pray for them. That's all you need to know. All right. And I know that they'll take that and run with it. Not have, I need details. I need details. Like what? Listen, we're trying to reach those who are lost and in darkness with the gospel of Christ. And they don't need a lecture as to why their lives are a mess, as to why their lives has turned out the way that they have. Because for the most part, they already know the answer of why their lives are a mess. So to get a lecture from us, listen, I'm going to help you out here, but the reason why this is happening is this. And hearing it from us isn't going to help the situation. All it's going to do is fan the flames. But I guarantee you, if you tell that person that's struggling with his broken life, listen, I'm praying for you. It's going to make an impression on you. I can't tell you how many times Bruce can, same thing. You tell someone, I'm praying for you. They'll say, listen, please keep praying. I need your prayers. Thank you for your prayer. It makes an impression on them, not a lecture. If you extend to them the love of God without any strings attached, without any lecture, without any judgmental attitude, it will have a powerful impact on their lives. Amen. And that love of God shown to them may be what brings them to Jesus. The love of God. The danger of wrong assumptions. And then lastly, and I'm done, the danger of spiritual blindness. The man in this story was physically blind, but I'll tell you this, he was in a lot better shape than them Pharisees. He found Jesus. And not only was his blinded eyes healed, but his blinded eyes were also opened spiritually. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound to save a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. That verse is the story of this blind man. He was given sight, but more importantly, he found God when his spiritual blindness was lifted. The irony of the situation was the fact that the Pharisees were the religious leaders of the Jews. They knew the scriptures, but they didn't know God. They should have recognized that Jesus was the promised Messiah they had been waiting for, but they didn't get it. I mean, at one point, they assumed, and there it is again, they assumed that Jesus was born in Nazareth because that's where he grew up. So, the stumbling block for them was the Messiah is supposed to come from Bethlehem. Don't you think someone would have had the smarts to say, hey, by the way, not for nothing, Jesus, where were you born? Were you born in Nazareth? He would have flat out told them, I was born in Bethlehem. Boom, there's your answer. They just assumed it was Nazareth. So that was a stumbling block right there. I'll tell you this much. Jesus said this concerning the Pharisees in Matthew 15:14. He said, let them alone. Don't have nothing to do with them. Leave them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind leads the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. Wow. They had 20/20 vision. They didn't need glasses. They had great eyesight. But Jesus saw them as blind leaders of the blind. What about that? Their blindness was a lot worse than the blindness of that man that was begging for alms. Every move that Jesus made, they watched him, hoping to find fault with him. They heard everything he said. They saw the miracles that he did with their own eyes, yet they refused to believe. They even foolishly accused him of casting out devils by the devil through Beelzebub, prince of devils. That's how blind they were. They saw the miracles. They didn't have any other explanation to say, well, he's got to be doing it to the devil. Notice what we're told in the rest of our story, beginning in the Gospel of John, beginning with verse 13. There's a lot to read here, but this is the end of the story. They brought to the Pharisees him that before times was blind. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, he put clay upon my eyes and washed, and now I do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath. Others said, how can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was division among them. They said unto the blind man again, what sayest thou of him that hath opened thine eyes? The blind man said, he's a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he'd been blind. Now they thinking that he was blind, and he wasn't blind all that time. He was just begging for money under false pretenses. So they called his parents. Verse 19, and they asked them, saying, is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? This is where the parents throw him under the bus. His parents answered them and said, we know this is our son and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we don't know. Or how his eyes were opened, we don't know. Ask him, he's of age. Let him speak for himself. These words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. So their position in the synagogue meant more to them than coming to Jesus. They would have said, listen, we don't know how come he's got a sight, but we're going to look into it. And if what he says is true, count us in. We're going God's way. We're coming to Jesus. That's what they should have said, but they worried about their position. They worried what others would think. Therefore said his parents, he is of age, ask him. Then again called they the man that was blind, and said to him, give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. How do you know that? Jesus went about doing good. They never caught him committing any kind of sin. Assumptions. He answered and said, listen, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I know is, I was blind, but now I see. That's all I know. I was blind, but now I see. You do the math. Then said they to him again, what did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I told you already, and you did not hear. Wherefore would you hear it again? You want to hear it again? Well, are you going to be his disciples? Are you going to get saved? Then they reviled him and said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know not that God spake unto, we know that God spake unto Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't know him from Adam. Verse 30, the man answered and said unto him, Why, herein is a marvelous thing has been done. A marvelous miracle has happened. But you know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened my eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshipper of God, and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he couldn't have done it. They got mad at him when he rebuked them like that. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sin. Are you going to try to teach us? And they cast him out. No great loss there. Kind of funny how God works. Because he was born blind, he wasn't allowed in the temple. After he got his sight, the first place he went was the house of God. Wanted to get in there, see what was doing. Well, probably that was his only time to go in there. God let him go into the temple and see what was going on, and then they cast him out and say, You're not welcome here. Oh well. At least I got to see what it looked like. So, at a moment when his trouble should have been over, at a time when he should have been rejoicing because he got his sight, his parents kind of distanced themselves from him. The Pharisees were calling him a liar, kicked him out of the temple. This guy didn't have a friend in the world. But guess what? Once again, Jesus was passing by. Oh, yeah. Jesus was passing by in his darkest hour of need, and he got gloriously saved, and his sight was restored. And here he is. I can just see him sitting on the steps saying, Man, what in the world's going on? And guess what? Jesus showed up again. Verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. And when he had found him, Jesus went looking for him. When he had found him, he said to him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? Jesus told him, You're looking at him. Wow. Jesus said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that's talking with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him.
Amen. Awesome.
Drop to verse 40. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words and said to him, Are we blind also? Jesus said to them, If you were blind, you should have no sin. But now you say, We see, therefore your sin remains. Power. Jesus is saying, listen, this guy was blind, but now he sees. His spiritual vision has been opened. You all think that you got all the answers. You think you got life figured out. You think you can see everything clearly. But you are the ones that are blind. The danger of spiritual blindness. So there it is. What do you do with those that have spiritual blindness? What should you do when you come across people that are blind spiritually? Number one, all you can do is pray for them. Pray that God would open their eyes to the truth and that they might come to know Jesus. I've talked to folks. Bruce was telling me a story. He couldn't get a word in edgewise. He didn't try to argue with him. He prayed for the guy. And that's sometimes all we can do, because arguing don't amount to nothing. It don't accomplish nothing. Getting into arguments only agitate the situation. We want to keep that door of opportunity open. And there's nothing that's going to shut a door quicker than arguing with people. When you see it getting a little heated, just walk away from it and start praying to God. Lord, soften their heart. Lord, convict their heart. Lord, break them of whatever's holding them from salvation. And then lastly, as stated earlier, just keep loving them to Jesus. Because love covers a multitude of sins. Showing them the love of God might be what it takes for them to come to salvation. We can't love enough. Never forget, but for the grace of God, we traveled down that same road. We were the same way until someone reached out to us and told us about Jesus and gave us a tract and invited us out to church and told us that they were praying for us. Is someone who's willing to touch our lives with the love of God. Can we do any less? That's it. Was I